Okay, we are here for test security training for the 23-24 school year. This is the one that gives us all the information with when you pair that with reading your manual and going over the slides and all the information, you can sign your oath, and this is the oath training, basically, security and confidentiality training for this school year. We all know that training never takes the place of reading the manual. And so make sure you're using all the resources. And this actually covers all of our security and confidentiality for all state testing. All right, I attached your manual to an earlier email and sent the online link. There's also a link right here in your slides that says District and Campus Coordinator Resources, but there's a lot of great information in there for anyone, like specific things about accommodations, and really those are the state guidelines I follow. And if I have a question, I go in there, I hit search, and we find out what the letter of the law is, because there's so much information to unpack. There are the 4 tests. STAR has a sister, STAR Alt, TELPAS has a sister, TELPAS Alt, but those are also all state tests that are covered throughout this year. All right, so what is test security? This is how we preserve the integrity of the test and all its content. That it ensures that our results are meaningful and valid. There's really no other way to say that. We need to adhere to the instructions and procedures and do all the things within the letter of the law. If you'll look down here, here's all the education codes that are cited, and this is, I believe, most of them. There's probably a couple that aren't on here, but it also ensures that we're testing fair and giving the same opportunities for all of our kids. So it involves accounting for our materials before, during, after administration. That's where our checklist comes into play. And that's why we also tell y'all, from the moment you sign out your bucket, treat everything as secure, and then you're held accountable for what comes back in. We just want to make sure that everybody involved in administering assessments has to have training. This includes anybody, even if they're coming to relieve you. There was a situation that we were told in training where a school secretary was wanting to make sure everybody got their lunches that they had ordered that day. So she went and stepped in someone's room, but on their campus, they didn't have everyone do security and confidentiality training. So they were actually right in the middle of a testing violation. And so it was an error, and it had to be notated and documented and all of those fun things. So test security, it does include all the documents. That's your online tickets. It's your supplemental aids. It's testing materials of any type. Alt still has test booklets. They also have image cards and all the different things. So anything that has to do with testing, just consider it secure. All right, and it starts with us, and it starts right here. We've got to be trained on all things. You've got to read your manuals, you're signing your oath, and then actively monitor to ensure the tests are administered in the way that they're supposed to. And you need to investigate and report anything that is off. It says alleged or confirmed incidents. You report, I investigate, and we just leave it at that. Hopefully it doesn't result in a no score. Hopefully it doesn't result in us reporting that behavior to the state. Sometimes we just have mistakes, but we need to do everything that we can to ensure that they don't happen on our watch. All right, let's talk about testing irregularities. These are incidents that result in anything that's deviating from our procedures. So you wonder why we have a checklist. Well, it puts the things in the education code into play. It puts things in our manuals into play. It puts all procedures governed by the state. It helps us stay in compliance with those things. So if anything goes off track, or if it seems weird, If it doesn't go according to plan, just know I'm never going to go, oh my gosh, that's not a big deal. I'm going to treat it as the way it needs to be treated. I'm going to listen. And if I don't, you can always come back to me and go, I remember what you said about training. Because sometimes in the hustle of the moment, I know we can all forget that we need to bestow grace and we need to be good listeners. Because when things happen like this, it's not necessarily that anybody was trying to have something intentional. Testing can be stressful. And so we just need to do the best we can, give grace to each other. Something happens, we investigate it and pursue it in the fashion that we need to, given the situation. There's serious and procedural errors. So there's two types, or irregularities, I'm sorry, serious and procedural irregularities. Serious, they are severe violations of the security or confidentiality. They go against the equitable intent that the test is created to be given. They have to be immediately reported to investigated by our district testing coordinator. So that means your responsibility is the moment something happens, just like I said in that previous slide. Anything that goes against our plan, against the manual, anything that just raises that eyebrow for you, you need to report. You need to report. In most cases, I would say you poke your head out, get your assist, tell them you need to talk to me, or tell them what's going on and they can speak to me, and then you start on the paperwork. It can result in certifications being pulled. It can even result in a charge, a misdemeanor charge, I believe. They have to be reported to TEA, but we treat everything as, if it's off, we treat it as a regularity and we investigate, and then we let the people above us decide where it falls and what we do. Procedural, those are things that reflect just deviations from our procedures. They're minor. They're not taking away from the test. They're not adding to the test. They don't represent severe breaches of the security or confidentiality. They don't necessarily require a call to TEA unless the district guides that, but everything has to be reported quickly. So there's different categories for procedural errors. There's monitoring errors, eligibility errors, accommodation errors, improper accounting errors, and training errors. So there's 5 big categories that fall under procedural. So when we look at serious, we're talking about things that just totally breach the intent of the test. And basically, in the big scheme of things, the huge word you could use is it falls under some kind of cheating, for lack of a better description. It's unfair advantage, or goes against the very nature of the test or the very letter of the law when it comes to security. So it could include any of these things, but it's not limited to these things. You know, it seems like we could roll our eyes and go, what on earth? Why would someone directly or indirectly assist a student? But if you get on down here, some things may have an innocent intent, but they turn to something different. Discussing or disclosing secure test content or student responses. Sometimes people get very tempted in their monitoring to go, oh, they were struggling, or this kid told me, or we cannot discuss the test. Viewing the content. The best active monitoring tells me what's going on in the room and accounts for the kids in the room, but you shouldn't be able to see a question on the test. So just do the best that you can to ensure that everything is equitable and secure in your room, and hopefully none of these things fall into play. Procedural errors, again, these are some examples. There's not limited to these things. So a student submitted their test without the test administrator assistance, and nothing was actually submitted. So the test administrator, I know sometimes kids will go ahead and submit without our assistance, but in our checklist, we say Make sure your kids know to raise their hand, and you'll help them submit. You guide them through that process, and that helps lessen the likelihood of someone submitting without answers being on there. The designated support, one of the accommodations wasn't provided, or improper active monitoring. Maybe somebody didn't read the script exactly as it said to be read. All the things that are there. So, students improperly monitored, students were issued test materials or test tickets, test administrator did not properly complete the required seating chart. So all of these things are examples of procedural errors, but they're not limited to them. There's vast amounts of those that you can see. All right, there's penalties for that. Here's the administrative codes. Even right here, notice it says criminal penalty. You can get your certification taken away. You can lose your job. You can get filed on in a Class D misdemeanor. That's on your record. Okay, just do your best that you can to live above reproach in this realm of testing. All right, so when we report, we have a little sheet, and it's how we file our testing irregularities. We just call them irregularities on our campus. And more than likely, most of ours are procedural when they happen, but we have to document. So one of the first things on there, it says, like, explain what happened, how it occurred, how it was discovered, who was involved. Tell us what happened as specific and as detailed as you can. Include information about how the problem was resolved or remedied. And notice that number 4 says, if possible, include a plan of action to prevent the incident. So when it says at the bottom of our papers, how could this have been prevented? There's a lot of times that it has to do with a phone that a student didn't turn in, and someone's asked for them all. It's not like they don't have their other phones. It could be anything. So sometimes there's not a way to prevent it from happening, because we've done the best that we can to ensure the validity of all that's occurring in that class. So 1, 2, and 3 will always be on the report. Number 4, sometimes it is not anything we could have prevented, but if we can, put the suggestion on how we might be able to prevent it in the future. Okay, here's some tips in order to do that. Make sure that your roster is accurate. Know your accommodations page. When you flip on there and it tells what accommodations, provide the ones that are there. And if you don't know how to do that, ask the question. Ask the question. Okay, create accurate seating charts. We have to know where the students are. Provide the test materials that are allotted for the children. Make sure that the test tickets go to the right kid. So that's why we always say, have your students check their birthday. We have several students with the same exact name. We have siblings that have the same names. We have twins that even have the same birthdays and the same names. I don't make this up. I promise that is true. So you've got to let them see their IDs. Just validate who they are so that no one's taking the wrong test for someone else. And if you are a teacher of the 5 EOC areas, English 1, English 2, Algebra 1, Biology, US, you need to go through the rosters. When we say make sure your students know where to go, that's also you accounting for the fact that kids that have been enrolled in your class are taking the EOC as they should be. So verify student responses, help them turn in, provide the right test materials, go by your checklist. It will cover every single bit of these things. And again, these are just some things to help prevent those insecurities. There is an electronic device statement, and we have to read it to students prior to testing. For us, it is in the front cover of your room folder. And most of the time it's on a hot pink piece of paper. So then one of the first things on your checklist, no matter what the test is for students to turn in their electronic devices. Remember, that's not just cell phones. And remember, you need to say all of your electronic devices. If you have more than one phone, I'm not going to ask you why, but I need them all in here. We have no idea, and we don't need to try to make up in our head those reasons, but smartwatches, cell phones, earbuds, any of these things can cause an insecurity, and it can invalidate a test. So if it goes off and it's in your possession, we'll still document it, but they gave it up. They may have forgot to turn it off, but they did the best they can. So let's just remember those things. You have to read it. It's in the guidelines, and we've got to take those up and do the best we can to make sure that environment is as it should be. All right, TEA considered a serious violation if a student or staff member photographs or duplicates secure test content or disseminates the information using an electronic device. You are immediately to contact me, and I will contact our district testing coordinator immediately if that is warranted. When a phone goes off and it's in the room and it's not in the bucket, we have to truly on point, be in that room, find out where it's coming from, and then investigate the phone or device, whatever it was. 9 times out of 10, they're not doing anything with it. Somebody just texted them, or there was some notification that went off and it signaled that they still had that on their person. But in a district last year, things did appear on Snapchat, and I believe on TikTok, maybe on Insta, I'm not really sure, but it got on social media. And so TEA has to get involved. It can invalidate the scores of an entire school. So do your best as far as it depends on you. Get those electronic devices, read what's going on, actively monitor. Okay. When students are crafty, y'all know it. Y'all know it better than anyone. They can gain an unfair advantage in a way that there really isn't one. So if it appears that someone is cheating in any way, maybe they slip some little cheat sheet in their pocket, maybe they're trying to look at somebody else. The looking at somebody else's, you can be very present and shut that down. And if it continues, get your assist, get your overseer, get somebody to come in there and help. But if it is determined after an investigation that a student did gain an unfair advantage in some way, if they cheated, then we will invalidate their test. All right. Test administrators who have permission to view secure test content have to be retrained and reminded they are viewing secure content. All security measures outlined in the manuals and in the guidelines must be followed. I will tell you that this is not as, it doesn't necessarily pertain to everybody. You can't view content. No one can view content. Except when it comes to giving star alt, they have to give the test in an oral manner. They have, so it is just totally different. So this is just a reminder that you cannot respond to test questions on your own, make notes about the test, write notes, rephrase, provide verbal or nonverbal assistance to anything that has to do with test content. If you need some guidelines about the accessibility features and the accommodations, they can be found here. And let's just remind ourselves that any accommodation, in order for it to come into play, it has to be routinely, effectively, and independently used by students and proven to be, that's proven to be effective. So we need to have a routine of implementing those before it goes to an entity that puts those into play for testing. And everything that is a classroom accommodation is not necessarily a testing accommodation. So make sure you know the difference and things that are allowable for everyone, and then things that have to be put in play as a formal accommodation by 504 LPAC, RTI, or SPED. All right, maintaining a testing environment. Did you know that this is your responsibility? We do our best to check rooms, and that is very difficult when people decide that theirs doesn't have to be done in the same manner that everyone else's. We have to remember to operate as a team when it comes to this. When someone comes in your room, you know by the schedule what test is going to be given in your room of record. So English, math, biology, U.S. history. If it can help or hinder on the test that is being given in your room, it has to be covered or taken down. When in doubt, cover it up or take it down. It's not necessary to remove every single instructional reference, but if it's going to specifically assist on a test question on a subject-specific test, then do it. No element of the room should hinder any student's performance. None. And it is the responsibility, the final responsibility rests on the person giving the test in the room. But it is also the partial responsibility of the person whose room it is. Sometimes those are not the same people. Sometimes the person that is giving the test is not the person who is normally in the room. So just that's a partnership, and we need to make sure that we are doing that. Also, the halls that are close to those, we need to be mindful of those. If it's up and it can assist with content, it's got to be covered up or come down. And then we always have to put the do not disturb sign on the door. The desks need to be facing the same way. They have to be cleared of anything other than the testing materials for that day. All right, timing. There's a little clause, and I don't see if it made it in here. It looks like my whole sentence is missing, so I'm gonna have to fix this on this slide before I send this out to the staff. So, timing of the test. As y'all know, last year the extended time thing went away. We weren't timing the test, but there is something that the state has put into play. Y'all know our tardy bell rings at 8:30. Our final bell rings at 4. That's 7.5 hours. So the state says a child cannot spend their time testing for more than 7 hours. So we will go back to documenting, just as a manner of record, on your seating chart. It'll have the room start time. It also has it on your roster. And then there's a start-stop sheet for if a student's start time is different from that. We go ahead and document the start time for lunch. We continued to do that last year, but we're going to make sure people are really doing that this year, because we do stop for lunch. So that time isn't figured in as part of the time a student is actually testing. And we all know that just because our tardy bell rings at 8:30, there's no way we will start testing at 8:30. So we will be within the letter of the law, but documentation is always something for us. In our guidelines, it does say, if possible, campuses should dismiss students from the testing session at scheduled intervals. Here's what I will say about that. I just want to address it because it's something you're going to see in the manual. Bottom line is we will consolidate when it comes to smaller groups in the summer, and we will consolidate in December. But in those general testing times in the spring, this is what we use to guide us when we go back on regular schedule. We monitor how many kids are still testing. When it's feasible to move to regular schedule and move the kids that are continuing to test, we will. Okay? All right. Retention of documentation. I have to keep this for 5 years. And it's crazy insane, but we do and we will. So make sure that you've included all the things that you're supposed to, because I have to keep a record of all of them when it comes to your oaths, the seating charts, all of our testing documentation. Late arriving students, if they're arriving late to school and there's still enough time for the test, it doesn't say I have to give them 7 hours. It says they cannot work for more than 7 hours. So if a kid is really late and they want to start and I'm willing to let them, then I can give them up to 7 hours, even if I want to stay late. So test directions have to be read to them, and they just have to be allowed sufficient time to take the test. Calculators. Okay, here's the deal. Students have a calculator embedded online. We don't have to worry about this anymore. I just wanted to address that. They are required for these tests, and they're embedded in our tests. We can all hip hip hooray for that. Algebra 1 works through Desmos, and it is embedded exactly like that in the test. Kids just need to know how to access it. And biology, the same. Dictionary policy, same thing. Students have a dictionary embedded in the online platform. But I will say that we are going to put a couple of paper dictionaries, or we may just have them with the assist in the hallway by the bucket. And if a student wants a paper dictionary for an English 1 or English 2 exam, we will provide that for them. All right, actively monitor, actively monitor, actively monitor. We have to be accountable for what's going on in the room. You can have a clock or stopwatch available if is needed. We just like that to have a kid to reference, but we're not timing in the room. You have to you have to remind students participating on a paper to record their answers on documents, and we do have a handful of kids that is involved with them, but it's typically a different type of test. It's not with our STAR EOC. Actively monitor at all times, and if a school emergency arises, follow our procedures. Here's the thing, we're gonna communicate, so everybody communicate well and be receptive of the communication that is happening. Take it in, be a good listener, and listen for the real important stuff, because sometimes we tune out. All right, make sure that you follow your checklist, collect the things that you should, report things to me that need to be reported. Remember what has to be done. It's like, I don't know how many times we can say the same things over and over again, right? All right, there is some web-based training. More details are going to be provided on this. Our teachers that are new to our campus and first-year teachers, we're going to be asking you to participate in those web-based training modules, and other people are allowed to. That's fine, but we are requiring our first-year people on our campus. All right, so you've got things to do, and this date, I got to correct it. I'm sorry, because I'll have till December 15th. December 15th is when everything needs to be turned in, okay? The oaths are tricky. There's places where you initial, there's places where you sign. If you are a para or non-certified teacher, your oath will be on yellow. I'll be placing those in boxes today. So you're going to complete your form. Make sure to comment your name on the YouTube video. Those of you that have watched online today, I know who you are. I know all 5 of you really well. So you do not need to go comment on the video. So if I send you some email that says it's missing, say, remember I was live. All right. So all of your things are not due till December, but I had to get the training in. I appreciate your attention. Ask questions if you have them. I'm always available. And thank y'all for being here today. Y'all have a good day. Thank y'all so much. That's the conclusion of our training.
Thanks, Valerie.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good day.
Valerie.